Hello my friends, and thank you so much for joining me. The video that you're about to watch is a recording of a series of classes that I delivered on Buddhist philosophy during my time in the Shaolin Warrior Monk program. The recording has been edited for the sake of brevity and the enjoyment of an online audience. So with that out of the way, please relax and enjoy the video.
Welcome. Thank you all for coming, guys. I'm going to begin the lesson with kind of a recap of what we've covered because I think it kind of leads into what we're about to talk about. The topic of today's lesson is dependent origination and karma. I think karma hopefully can be really practical for us here in the program. So last class we talked about emptiness. So if you remember, emptiness we talked about for a while. It was trying to get across the point that things exist, but that they lack intrinsic self-nature. So the world around us is there, clearly, but when we label it, we are creating an illusion because things are not really what we say they are. And then we carried on to say that, like, are there any intrinsic properties to the world? And the one that the Buddhists tend to talk about is change or flux. So you can't really grasp onto anything, like stepping into a river. It's not the same river as the last time you stepped into it, but it does always change. So the world is like this. So I actually have the quote here from Heraclitus. I like it because it's nice. It says, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man." So this is what the Buddhists would say about the nature of reality, that everything changes. You change, the world around you changes, the mountains change, the earth will change. The sun will burn out eventually. Nothing is permanent, according to the Buddhists. And science seems to be pretty much in agreement with that, although we're not 100% sure about the ultimate end to everything, but it certainly seems as if the universe is just one big process. It's evolving over time. And also just kind of drawing your attention back to the fact that your body changes every 5 to 7 years, that you are not really you after that amount of time, so you're continually replacing yourself, and so this kind of calls into question whether or not you even really are a self, or if you are just part of this process of continual change. Certainly, in Buddhism, it's definitely a claim that there is no self, and that the self is just a fluctuation in reality itself. So all of this is kind of bringing me to the point here around what can we say further about the nature of change and the nature of reality. So a term that gets thrown around a lot in Buddhism is causes and conditions. This really means that everything is both a cause and a condition. Everything is a cause, everything is an effect, everything is related. If all you have is a river, then the structure of the river is going to influence the water, and the water upstream is influencing the river downstream. It's all one flowing system. So in terms of what these actually mean, conditions literally means the way things are, the way the world is arranged, where you're sitting, the way, it's nighttime right now and we're in China. These are all conditions. These are facts about our situation. And then causes are kind of the things that the relationships between the world around us. Same with effects. Cause and effect is just the relationship between things happening, right? So if it's really, really sunny outside, that's the cause for me being really hot and sweaty. And now I'm really hot and sweaty, so I'm ready to stretch more. So these things are connected, right? The conditions were that it was a hot day outside, and that caused me to be hot and sweaty, and then that caused me to be more flexible, and so on and so forth. So causes and conditions. Everything is both a cause and a condition. They're not two separate things. So things cause one another. Some of you may be familiar with Newton's laws of motion. So you recall a body remains at rest or in motion at a constant speed in a straight line unless acted on by a force. And his third law of motion is, if two bodies exert forces on each other, these forces have the same magnitude but opposite directions. So you might have just heard it said every action has an opposite and equal reaction. Have you guys heard that before? Right. People like to repeat that because it's very simple and it's a truism, although it's actually a misquote, but it basically gets the idea across. So this is kind of what the Buddhists are saying. everything has an opposite and equal reaction, and I mean everything. So, therefore, we would say that literally every single event in the whole of reality is connected to itself. Have you guys ever heard of the butterfly effect? It's like a metaphor, right? That a butterfly's wings can cause a hurricane. But as you say, the more precise statement is that, like, if you change one thing, everything else changes. It doesn't matter how small it is. So you kind of see where I'm going with this towards this concept over here. But anyways, so for now, just to get us kind of a bit more into this idea of dependent origination. By the way, I haven't even brought this word into it yet, but this is basically a word to say, you hear different forms of this. Sometimes you see codependent arising or dependent co-arising or dependent origination. I don't think it really matters. The point is that they're saying that all things are dependent in their origins. So everything depends on everything else and everything is connected. So there's no independent events, basically. So that's what they call this sort of overarching idea. So we're going to have a quick discussion. If you buddy up with the person next to you, or you can join a group of 3 if numbers work out. I'm going to write some questions up for us. Okay, so my questions here are hopefully kind of fun for you individually, but the first question is, think about the causes and conditions that brought you here tonight, and you're welcome to share that with your discussion partner. And just think about kind of like the main things that have actually brought you here. I'm sure some things will come to mind, but hopefully when you play out this exercise, you'll kind of start to expand and notice how many things are actually relevant. And then the second question is, what changes are you going to take place in your life because of the Shaolin Warrior program? So this is a question. This one is kind of about the past. What causes brought you here? And then this is kind of about the future. What will this cause in the future? So in Chan Buddhism, what they would really say is that the things that brought you to this moment right here, right now, it goes all the way back to that moment you made the decision, the moment you bought the tickets, the flights, the story of your life that got you inspired about Kung Fu in the first place, maybe the movies you watched or the idols that you had or the natural proclivities that you had, the fact that you were born in a certain country at a certain time. And actually, let's stop teasing it. It kind of just goes all the way back to the Big Bang. So literally every single thing had to happen the way that it happened in order to bring you to this moment right now. If anything had been different, like the butterfly flapping its wings, who knows what would have happened. But it's really just a way to illustrate that everything is necessary in order for you to arrive here right now. And the story of your life, this will always be part of you. So from now on, you will never be the same person that you were before you arrived here, for better or worse. And it will have an effect. You can be sure of that. So that's kind of what this is all about. And I guess if you could really summarize it, it's basically that everything is connected. So don't underestimate, small actions and notice how they can magnify into very large actions. Okay, so I think with that in mind, we can shift to the second topic, which is karma. I'm going to start this with the reading which you have in front of you. This is a bit of a funny one because the Aganya Sutta is quite long. So if you want to read the full thing, you're welcome to do it online. I kind of found this is like a summary / paraphrase version of the parts that I wanted. So we'll just follow along anyway. So follow along with your eyes. The earth's nectar appears. Creation myths often begin with a dark, formless world of water and describe the emergence of divisions and structures of the world. They do not differentiate the physical, biological, ecological, or social, and as such, distinctions come later. The moon and sun were not found, nor were the stars and constellations, day and night, months and fortnight, years and seasons, or male and female. Beings were simply known as, quote, beings. Throughout the discourse, this person is talking about the sutta, throughout the discourse has been a special interest in tracing the origins of language and how different usages came about. Here the term beings is presented as a natural choice. There are beings because they are alive. Later, words are selected to convey a certain political or moral stance. After a very long period has passed, the earth's nectar curdled in the water. It appeared just like the curd on top of hot milk rice as it cools. It was beautiful, fragrant, and delicious, like ghee or butter. And it was as sweet and pure as dwarf bee honey. Now one of these beings, was reckless, thinking, "Oh my, what might that be?" They tasted the earth's nectar with their finger, they enjoyed it, and craving was born in them. And other beings, following that being's example, tested the earth's nectar with their fingers, they enjoyed it too, and craving was born in them. The moon and the sun appear. Then these beings started to eat the earth's nectar, breaking it into lumps. But when they did this, their luminosity vanished. And with the vanishing of their luminosity, the sun and the moon appeared, stars and constellations appeared, day and nights were distinguished, and so were months and fortnights, and years and seasons. So far the world had evolved once more. Then those things began eating the earth's nectar. With that as their food and nourishment, remained for a very long time. But so long as they ate the earth's nectar, their bodies became more solid, and they diverged in appearance, some beautiful, some ugly. And the beautiful beings looked down on the ugly ones. It is the ugly ones who are at fault for jealousy. We are more beautiful than the ugly. They are the ugly ones. And the vanity of the beautiful ones made the earth's nectar vanish. They gathered together and bemoaned, "Oh, what a taste, what a taste." Ground fungus. When the earth's nectar had vanished, ground fungus appeared to those beings. Such fungi spread like tendrils underground, sometimes appearing above the surface, sharing nutrients and information between organisms. It appeared just like a mushroom. It was beautiful, fragrant, and delicious, like ghee or butter, and it was sweet as pure dwarf bee honey. Then those beings started to eat the ground fungus, and that as their food and nourishment they remained for a long time. But so long as they ate the ground fungus, their bodies became more solid and they diverged in appearance, some beautiful, some ugly. And the beautiful beings looked down on the ugly ones. We are more beautiful, they are the ugly ones. And the vanity of the beautiful ones made the ground fungus disappear. When the bursting pods had vanished, ripe untilled rice appeared to those beings. It had no powder or husk, pure and fragrant, with only the rice grain. What they took for supper in the evening, by the morning had grown back and ripened. And what they took for breakfast in the morning had grown back and ripened in the evening, leaving no trace showing. Those beings eating the ripe untilled rice as their food as their food and nourishment remained for a very long time. Okay. Apologize if that's difficult to follow, but alas, the point there is it's kind of like an origin story for the earth, among other things, but it's also like an origin for this idea of karma. So these beings at the start are able to float, and they're described as ephemeral and like very light and wafy, and they can fly around. And then the earth's nectar appears, and they begin eating this nectar, and it's sticky and it's yummy, but it weighs them down, and they get too heavy to fly, and so they can no longer leave the surface of the earth. And so on and so forth. You hear that like that runs out because they get envious and jealous of one another, and so then they have to move on to the fungi, and then that runs out, and then kind of they're just left with rice, right? Like just ordinary rice. So I really like this because it kind of explains the way that through your attempts to gather more, and you're always hungry and looking for something that's sweet and sticky. I like the fact that they use the metaphor of like honey or ghee, honey being very sweet and ghee being fat, you know. It's these delicious foods, right, that we crave, and if we get too attached to them, literally, it weighs you down. Like literally, you get bigger, right? So I like the fact that it puts that into a parable, that it's through your kind of craving and forward action that you begin to weigh down your spirit. And so is the idea of karma. So thinking about karma, the word karma actually just means action. Not like moral action, nothing like that, just literally action. It's a very simple word, actually. But as we have heard, everything is connected to everything else. So karma is important, action is important, because your actions are connected to everything else, right? So this is an idea from the Greek philosopher Aristotle, but it's basically this idea that actions lead to habits, habits shape your character, and your character basically shapes your life. It's who you are. So therefore, before you take action, make a choice, like what am I doing? And be careful about that choice, because as I've said, everything is connected, right? So every little choice that you make is connected to everything else in your life. You may not be able to perceive how, but excuse me, I think you better believe that it is, because I think at this point it seems like the science is fairly like in agreement on this idea that like there's no isolated events that are outside of the system. Everything is connected to everything else. So in a very literal way, in physics, everything is connected. So it's pretty much kind of an objective fact. So it's probably worth bearing in mind. So I've said here, like karma, your karma is kind of the aggregate of all of your actions over your life. It affects who you are right now in this room. It affects your health. It affects your job, your work, your relationships. It affects everything, right? And it eventually takes on a moral dimension. So I said that it's not necessarily moral, but it also becomes moral. And I think that there's two reasons for this. So the first one is what you do has a neurological effect. It shapes a pattern in your brain. So if you were to tell a lie, you have to, send a signal in your brain that's like the lie pathway, right? And every time you do that, it's like practice. So when you practice a form, you're creating a new like a Kung Fu form. You're creating a new pathway in your brain. And then the next time you go to do it, it's like easier than it was the last time. And if you practice it many, many times, the form becomes second nature. And then you can literally respond, in a fight in a way that a form would have trained you. So the point there is that your brain is like this plastic thing that changes every time you make an action. And so if you practice lying, what happens to you? You become a liar. So that leads to the second reason is that like people actually remember these things. So the idea is like what goes around comes around, eh? If you lie repeatedly, then you become known as a liar and people are less likely to trust you. And then that kind of like reverberates back at you and people don't share their secrets with you or they don't trust you to, support them or whatever. So I think people often think about like you hear this phrase like karma's a bitch, and I don't really like that because it's like this retribution aspect, like what you do will be done to you, which is kind of like a very like simplistic way of looking at it, but it is kind of part of karma. But it's basically, like if you put that out there in the world, eventually it will come back to you. Like you don't get away with anything, essentially, is what it's sort of saying. Like everything is connected, eh? So, because as we know, all actions have consequences. But I really like thinking about it in terms of the brain, right? So even if you think, oh, nobody's going to see this, right? Like, I don't know, it's like you don't brush your teeth one morning and you're like, who cares? It's my teeth. I'm not going to like I'm running out the door for work and I realize like as I get in the car that I haven't brushed my teeth and I'm like, oh, should I go back up the stairs and brush my teeth? And then I'm like, nah, it's not worth it. Like who gives it, But it's like, okay, so you've just made it a little bit more likely that you're not going to clean your teeth next time. And what happens when you don't clean your teeth is you get cavities. So it's this small effect that accumulates over time. Okay, so we're going to have a little discussion about this now. I've got questions for you guys to talk about. So they are questions I've got there. Some of these should probably be quite obvious now from what I've said, but how can we improve our karma? What actions are related to our karma? And how do we know if something will improve our karma? So, okay, fair enough. Your karma is kind of like a balance sheet, like in accounting. It shows all of your assets and liabilities. So your karma is the accumulation of all the actions in your life. And so if somebody is like in prison on death row, you could say that their karma is pretty bad, right? They're going to die for their karma. Something they've done is extremely egregious and bad, and now they're being sentenced to death for it. Somebody is in a place of high acumen or like Shifu is inspiring other people, you might say that they have pretty good karma. They've led a pretty good life up until this point. They must have made good decisions. So think of yourself as having a karma. You can even ask yourself, like, what is my karma right now? What do I think about my own karma? And then you can ask yourself, like, what you could do to improve it. I could probably mention like the samsara, which is this idea that you have a rebirth cycle. So in Buddhism, they would believe that you've had past lives, and depending on your choices in those lives, that will affect your status in the next life, and literally also what kind of animal you are and where you're born and what your circumstances are. And I think it also goes back to the sutta that I read at the start around how if in your past life your ancestors or whatever were very, very greedy and weighed down, then all of that karma gets passed on to you. Some people might feel that they were dealt a bad hand in life, right? It's a bit of a religious idea, I suppose. But it's their thing. And there's also different opinions on how much of your past life and how much of your previous karma you actually have access to. So some Buddhists would say that you can actually, through meditation or through cultivation, you can remember your past life and you can remember who you were and all this. And then others would say you really can't, and that you just kind of have what you have now. So I don't think there's like a single opinion on how much you can actually know about your previous life, but it is an interesting idea that, and also like it comes back to this, that like the things in the past affect the present. So that's why I like thinking about like my own origin of like I was born in a certain country, in a certain place, in a certain time, and like things like like world wars and stuff like massively shaped like the countries that I was born in, and like my grandfather like having children when he had them, and all these kinds of things that are like related to like the karma of the past that like has resulted in the life that I've had. So what actions are related to our karma? Well, the idea is that like no action escapes karma. So be aware, right? Because this is the thing, is like people think that I said no action escapes karma. Be aware. And this is what I mean. It's like, if you steal and nobody ever finds out about it, is it really a problem? And karmic philosophy would say, yes, it is. But it's not just moral acts, right? Like, if you really want to get into it in like Chan Buddhism, it's like the way that you walk, the way that you eat, the way that you sleep, like even the posture of your sleep, the posture of your sitting right now, like all these things. Posture is a good one, actually, because like, you lie down and you watch a movie and that's whatever, I'm just watching a movie. But like over your lifetime, you see what happens. So it's like this accumulation that starts to add up. But literally the word karma means action. So it's kind of a trick question. No action escapes. Karma is action. How can we improve our karma, or how do we know if something will improve our karma? Did anybody have any thoughts about this? Your thoughts and your speech are connected. So if you're like walking around with like, it's a good start to act well. But if your mind is full of shit, you're angry or you're frustrated, you're criticizing everything, it's very hard to like quarantine that and stop it from coming out of you, right? So you do actually have to be disciplined with your thoughts. But if it's much harder, I think it's harder to be disciplined with your thoughts than it is with your actions. Because like I don't, like sometimes in the mornings here, I don't really want to get up, and I have like this like complaining attitude, and I do it anyway because it's actually easier to get up than it is to fix my mind and then get up. So just get up. It's easier. And then that will hopefully fix the thought. And there are like more extreme interpretations of karma, like the Jainism, which was basically literally I want to melt away all of my karma. So fasting and having no possessions and doing nothing and literally meditating out in the summer in front of a fire to sweat. Because remember the sutta at the start, like it's like that you've accumulated all this karma. It's like it's in you, and like you've got all this like sticky honey kind of like almost like coursing through your veins. And so yes, through meditation, through standing in silence, through contemplation, and through not doing anything more, because every action is karma, and like literally that like all went into your ears. So if you could see sound waves, you would see this like radiation of like sound vibrations that all just went into your ears, and it probably didn't bother you because you're all awake and listening to me and whatever. But if I did it in the middle of the night, like in my room, and I went bang on the bed, that might have some consequences. But I just want to emphasize the fact that karma is literally action. Karma is literally action. Everything is related to your karma. And as you finally put and reminded me, actually, good thoughts, good words, good deeds. So I notice people tend to gravitate towards like big karmic issues, like what if I take this job, or what if my like marriage ends, or what if I don't learn a lesson because I've done something bad, right? That is all karma. But I think it's the way that our culture has framed this word karma. Karma is a bitch, karma is retribution. It's like missing the smallness of karma. Karma is like the way that I put my pen down on the table. Karma is the way that I chew my food. Karma is the way that I brush my teeth in the morning. And that's what I actually want you to recognize. So when you ask, like, in the lineup, no, calm down, like stand there. This is karma, right? Because you don't realize it, but when we do things like that, it has this like rippling effect around us. It's literally, you call it vibes, I think. I've heard you mention a few times, guys, the vibrations are quite high here. And people aren't necessarily noticing, but it's like, it's making this big kind of vibrational wave around you, and it's like, just be calm. That's your karma. So to kind of bring this back around, like the good thoughts, good deeds, good words thing is nice because it brings the karma right into the focal point of like, what are you doing right now? What are you thinking about right now? And don't worry about like, this enormous big conundrum you have in your life. I mean, worry about that because it matters. But the best thing I think is just to actually focus on like, how are you going to like push your chair back in tonight when you leave the classroom? Like that's something that people would say I'm really anal about it, but it's because I'm aware of like the karma, it means that the classroom is nice the next time we come back. And, it's like when you make your bed in the morning, it's like, it's nice when you come back and sleep. And I think if you just continue to do that, like the little thing in front of you that is, what should I do here, A or B? Do the right one. So to kind of go to this last question, how do we know if something will improve our karma? My belief is that you basically always know. If you don't know, maybe it's another reason. So if I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to go to bed tonight, I'm on my phone, I see that the clock is like 9:55 and I'm thinking like, I should probably put my phone down. Oh, but I'll keep scrolling. It's like, no, I know for a fact I should put my phone down. But why don't I? It's like, it's actually like a lack of willpower or a lack of discipline. And I personally believe that almost all actions are like this. So if somebody like offers you like a candy bar and you're kind of like, probably should. It's like, okay, that's that then. No, like you heard the answer and you ignored it. You know what I mean? Which is not to say you shouldn't have the candy bar. Sometimes you should have the candy bar. But my point is merely that I think you know. It's just whether or not you have the willpower and the discipline to actually act on it. And so I'm not confused basically in almost any of my actions. I basically always know like whether or not I should or shouldn't be doing something. Like with chores or whatever. I'm like, oh, it's like 7:51, I'm going to like walk back over and I'm like, Matt, like, so it's that quiet little voice. And so I think the difference between being able to know what the right thing is and acting on it and know what the right thing is and just kind of ignoring it is discipline. I think that is almost like the fundamental quality of discipline. Here, we are disciples of Shaolin and disciples of Shifu. So we do what we're told. We should be doing what we're told. We don't always, but I would say we do what we're told mostly because Shifu tells us and we respect him, and that's kind of the arrangement that we have here. But when we leave, Shifu is not going to be there. The only person that's going to be there is you. So really, what you're cultivating when you listen to somebody else is self-discipline, the ability to listen to the voice that tells you what the right thing is. And that's something I feel like you can take away from this place, if nothing else. It's like, be very, very obedient, because at the end of the day, when you leave, you need to be able to listen to yourself. And so many people literally cannot listen to themselves. They know better and they do it anyway. And then they make up all sorts of fibs and they deceive themselves and say, oh, well, I didn't know what the right thing was. I think you did. But you didn't act on it for lack of discipline or for lack of will or whatever it is. It's a very self-critical way of looking at things. But I think that there are situations when you may genuinely not know the right thing to do. Right? So like a friend comes to you with like a secret and says, oh, please don't tell anybody, but I cheated on my husband, and you're like really, really close with the husband and you're kind of like, oh, I really feel like I need to do, and you're like having a conundrum. Okay, fine. Like those situations do arise, but honestly, I think that they're pretty rare. I think that like 99.9% of your experience is not actually that challenging in terms of like what is right or wrong. I think it's challenging because of discipline, not because of lack of wisdom. So I don't know if that answers your question, Doreen. That you were kind of talking about how if you're not actually able to realize that it's a lesson. And so my first question is like, are you genuinely not able to realize it, or is there a resistance to, accept it? And if you're genuinely not able to realize it, then I guess like, what can you do, right? You just didn't see it coming. I didn't see Sasha's punch coming and I couldn't avoid it. If I had seen it, I would have. Well, what can you if you can't see it or you can't recognize it, what are you going to do? You couldn't have done otherwise. But if you know it's there and you're like, oh, I don't know if I should do it, it's like, I think you do know. Well, you know what my karma is telling me? That I should let you guys go and get some rest. So thank you so much for coming.